It's BYU. It's Texas Tech. It is a top 10 showdown in Lubbock. How does BYU come out on top? Well, I've got the details.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about this matchup, a standalone game of the week matchup as number 7 BYU takes on number 8 Texas Tech, and really what the implications are of said game. They're going to get more into the nitty-gritty details, players, and I think sequences in this game that could ultimately determine the outcome as BYU tries to overcome yet again being an underdog this season. Then we'll finish up today's show as we often do on a Friday with our mailbag. The Locked On Cougars Insider Group members have responded in mass. We'll get to as many of them ahead on today's show. All right, so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you guys that tomorrow's game is absolutely gargantuan for BYU. It is history for the BYU football program. It will be their first ever time being a ranked top 10 team facing off against a fellow top 10 ranked team. In fact, it's actually pretty rare air for a program like Texas Tech as well, because the last time that Lubbock, speaking of Texas Tech, had college game day in town was 2008 when number 1 Texas traveled there. Remember the Michael Crabtree game when Texas Tech upset them? Well, that was the first time in their history they had a top 10 showdown. And the very next week, they faced off against a top 10 ranked Oklahoma State squad. And since then, they have not played in a similar type matchup. So both of these programs are relative newcomers to the territory that they are participating in, but I don't think that's going to slow these two teams from absolutely throwing haymakers at one another. I am super, super excited for this game. I have been waiting all week to see it all play out, and I've done a number of different media appearances across the country, some in Texas, some nationwide, some local in Utah, and the prevailing sentiment is that there are a lot of people out there believe that it's in the Big 12's best interest if BYU loses this game. Let's Texas Tech and them get back on a collision course for Arlington to play in the Big 12 title game. And then BYU, in theory, gets their revenge down there in Arlington, thereby clinching the automatic college football playoff berth, but also seeing a program like Texas Tech at 11-1, likely also in the at-large conversation, if not outright clinching an at-large bid into the college football playoff, to take the Big 12 at least multiple teams in. Now, there is a program up the road from BYU, speaking of Utah, who they kind of need BYU to win out, to be quite frank. And there are other scenarios that Utah, being 13th in the country right now, according to the college football playoff rankings, could not need to play in the title game to get into the college football playoff. But the simple fact of life is BYU's up against it in this game. And I'm also of the opinion that BYU is being seriously devalued yet again when it comes to this matchup. For the life of me, I have been struggling all week long to understand that why our friends at FanDuel and other sports books out there have had BYU as big of a 10.5 point underdog in this game. Yeah, sure. Playing in Lubbock is one thing. That's absolutely going to give Texas Tech a little bit of an edge there. Is it the new uniforms that Texas Tech is donning? Well, BYU, to their credit, they're wearing new helmets with that Sailor Coug logo on the side that I'm absolutely in love with. I love that logo, and I love the fact it's going to be featured prominently in this game. Is it the fact that they think that Texas Tech is a machine and BYU is a bit of a paper tiger? Maybe that's the case. But all BYU has done this season is prove time and time again, as evidenced by their 8-0 record. If you want to go back to extend it back to last season, 19-2 over the last 21 games, they have shown a propensity to find ways to win football games no matter what the circumstances and no matter what happens to them in said games. There is an uncanny feeling around this BYU football program that they just won't be denied. I have used it often and said this often on this podcast for those of you who are everydayers, and I hope you all are, that a lot of times BYU understands that betting lines are there to entice bettors to bet on said games. They may be a little more outlandish, but this one feels like it's a little too large And there's something that the odds makers out there know that you, I, and anybody else out there who may be Joe Schmo fan doesn't know. I think BYU is absolutely capable of winning this game. And what's it going to take? Well, it's going to take a lot because you're going to need a guy like LJ Martin who's going to give it a go. We'll see how he looks early on in this game. And you got to see him kind of shrug off, to use the expression, his shoulder issue and say, I'm fine now. I had a conversation with a BYU player not that long ago, and they essentially told me, actually, a former BYU player, I should clarify that. It's not a current player, but did play at BYU, who indicated they had multiple shoulder injuries during their time in Provo. And their whole thought process was that when the adrenaline gets pumping, when you finally kick that ball off, you're in the middle of a game, you don't feel much of anything because, as he mentioned, the adrenaline's flowing. And we have seen some pretty impressive studies that adrenaline is an absolutely incredible thing that can help people overcome some pretty significant issues to play and perform at their best. That's what you hope for a guy like LJ Martin in this game, that he goes into it, may not be feeling 100%, but he gets out there, the juices get flowing. All of a sudden, he's like, you know what? Let's go. Let's get this thing done. It's going to be imperative that BYU has to be able to manufacture some rushing offense. It may not be to the same level that they've had up until the Iowa State game. So when they went into Iowa State, they were top 10 in the country in average rushing yards per game. I think it was a shade over 230 yards on average. If BYU gets to 230 yards against this Texas Tech defense, they will have absolutely obliterated the Red Raiders. It will be a blowout if BYU gets anywhere near that number. I will say that on the record right now. But I also don't expect that from BYU in this game. This is a game you're going to have to use a little more of what they call smoke and mirrors to generate some of that rushing offense. Cody Hagan, Parker Kingston on fly sweeps. You're going to need to use the short to intermediate passing game out in the flats with guys like a Preston Rex as an extension of the rushing attack to get you those yards that are going to keep Texas Tech honest in terms of their defensive alignment. You cannot, I repeat, you cannot afford, if you're BYU, to have guys like David Bailey, Lee Hunter, Jacob Rodriguez. They have a who's who, it feels like, of a front seven that is going to probably be NFL talent in the next NFL draft or successive drafts after that. They've got a ton of talent up front, and they are going to come after Bear Bachmeier. The one thing I love about Bear Bachmeier is another key to this game is that Bear Bachmeier has been absolutely unflappable this season. He loves playing the game of football. He carries himself with it's not an arrogance, it's just a quiet confidence is probably the best way to describe it. But he knows that he belongs at this level. And to have led BYU to a sterling 8-0 record and a number 7 national ranking as a true freshman, the future looks very, very bright for him. But this is the toughest opponent to date by a fair margin, if not a wide margin. Nothing against Utah, nothing against Iowa State or anybody else that BYU has played this season. None of them hold a candle to what Texas Tech is capable of in this game. And a guy like Bear Bachmeier, he's got to be on his absolute best. He's got to be his absolute best, I should say, to help BYU win this game. Is he capable of that? I absolutely believe he is capable of it, but he needs the guys around him to step up. He needs his receivers to get themselves open and catch that ball when it comes their way. There cannot be drops. He needs guys like LJ Martin, Preston Rex, whoever else is in the backfield alongside him. They need to cover that football up. He himself needs to avoid getting this ball punched out because Texas Tech, the way they generate turnovers is they punch the ball. They strip you a lot, and you have to avoid that. And most importantly, in my mind, for BYU in this game, that offensive line has got to have its best performance to date. Isaiah Jota, Waylon Lapuaho, Bruce Mitchell, Kyle Saforchuk, Austin Leusa, Sonny Mocassini, Andrew Gentry. That's the 8-9-man rotation, essentially, that's been BYU's offensive front this season. They've got to play and perform at their absolute best this week. If they do that, they will give BYU a fighting chance. If they don't, well, you may find yourself once again looking at that collision course and hoping that you can rebound against TCU a week from tomorrow and get back into the win column and keep that dream alive of facing off for a second time against the Red Raiders in Arlington, Texas. So crazy situation. College game day in town. Students have been camping out for well over a week at this point down there in Lubbock, and it's going to be an absolutely electric, raucous atmosphere down there at Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock, Texas. I, for one, wish I was going to be able to be there, but I am not. But looking forward to it all the same, and it is a big big opportunity staring BYU in the face. How do they pull it off? Well, we'll get more into that. I've got a couple other thoughts on what I believe BYU needs to do if they want to win this football game. One of them is one you may not have thought of, but it's one that was asked me by a Locked On Cougars insider group member. I think it's absolutely imperative BYU capitalizes on it because they've been pretty good at it all season long to this point. What is that? We'll get to it next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend, time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by our friends over at DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streak, saving you more every time you order. These players deliver when it mattered most. Let's break it down. So for BYU, they were on a bye week last week, but I'm going to go back to the Iowa State game, and it's going to go to Bear Bachmeier. You lose LJ Martin early on in this game, and for Bear, as a true freshman, to essentially put the offense on his back, he absolutely broke through, and he was the one that absolutely led BYU to that win. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance is not a fluke. Let's be real. Bear Bachmeier is absolutely on a streak. And just like Bear delivered for BYU, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays at DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday that you order, stack it up all season long. You save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep that streak alive, and fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, and the promo period runs through 11/18. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. If you have not subscribed, rated, and reviewed the show, please do so. We're available wherever you get your podcasts, also available on YouTube. It's not hard to find this content. It's daily for you guys. So as always, thank you, truthfully, for your support. All right. So let's talk about what I think BYU needs to capitalize in a game like this to win this football game. And the interesting part about the way this game will be played is these are two defenses. We have not talked a lot about BYU's defense that go about generating turnovers in different ways. Whereas BYU, I believe they're plus 10 in the margin. Let's see. Yeah, they are plus 10 in the margin. Their vast majority of their turnovers have come via interceptions. They have picked the ball off from opposing quarterbacks. Whereas, as I already mentioned this earlier, Texas Tech, they are like the peanut punch, like, extraordinaires. And if you know what Peanut Tillman was, he was coined as the peanut punch. He was very good at punching the ball out when he played for the Chicago Bears. Well, Jacob Rodriguez and the rest of the Texas Tech Red Raiders defense are kind of the second coming of that, but they do it as a unit. These two teams want to turn you over, and they've done so to pretty great effect. I think Tech, they're plus 8 in the margin themselves. So turnover margin is absolutely critical in this game if BYU wants to have a chance in it. The bigger point is that BYU has to be aware of when to take advantage of these opportunities. And what I mean by that is when you get an opportunity to flip the field, whether it's via punt, whether it's setting yourself up with better field position, kind of playing the strategic game, I'm telling you, average starting field position has been an underrated element of BYU's success this season. And a couple of you have asked me about different things that could help BYU in this game. Well, it's also been a big advantage of Texas Tech as well, because when you get turnovers, usually you have a pretty short field that give you a chance, if not outright score on that turnover, but you get a short field to capitalize on that. Texas Tech has lived on that with their offense for a lot of this season. And I'm not saying that BYU hasn't either, because they absolutely have feasted on opportunities generated by BYU's defense. The average starting field position in this game, I think whoever wins that very well might win this football game, even more so than the turnover margin might determine this game. These are two teams who've got offenses who are very capable of capitalizing on opportunities afforded them by their defense. We'll see who wins this average starting field position. And by the way, that also goes to using punt returns and kick returns to set yourselves up. And that's a place that I think BYU in the return game, Kelly Papinga has been very, very good about scheming things up for BYU. This would be an incredible time to see the best return units we have seen for BYU all season long. I'm getting really into the weeds here about different advantages I hope that BYU can find in this game, because they need to find every single one and exploit every single one to have a chance in this game. This Texas Tech team, I cannot reiterate how impressed I am with them. They are the class of the Big 12 in many respects, even though BYU is the undefeated team in this game. Texas Tech came into the season being projected as the best team in the Big 12, and outside of that upset loss to Arizona State, they have proven that time and time again. The nice part is, I will just say this in BYU's defense, is BYU came out of, in some people's minds, out of nowhere, and yet again has absolutely obliterated any and all expectations they had of them in the preseason. And all they have proven is to be a formidable foe themselves. It's not pretty. It's not awesome. Sometimes it's not like it's not appealing at times to watch this BYU team operate. But one thing I can always count on with this BYU team is they're never out of a game. You have to bury them if you want to win football games. And every opponent to this point has been unable to do just that. Will Texas Tech break that trend, and will they be capable of burying BYU? That remains to be determined, because that's why we get to watch this game play out in front of all of us. And the other side of it is, this is a BYU team that has a ton of self-belief in themselves. They believe no matter what the odds are stacked against them, that they will wiggle themselves off whatever hook they find themselves on and find a way to live another day, to play another down, to fight another opportunity, to find a way to win a football game. They've done it 8 times this season. This 9th opportunity, it is the biggest to date. It has the biggest stakes on it, and obviously has the nation's eyes upon it. Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler calling this game. It doesn't get better or bigger than this. College Game Days there in Lubbock. They're going to be doing features on BYU players, Texas Tech. Joey McGuire is going to appear in person at College Game Days. Often the home coach does. It is absolutely going to be a game for the ages for BYU, and they have to exploit, as I mentioned, and take advantage of I'm talking the most minuscule opportunities, advantages, determine whatever you will. They have to take advantage of those to have a chance in this game. I think BYU is capable of winning this game, and I have been asked time and time again, do you have a prediction for this game, Jake? Well, I'm going to give you the prediction right now. I have gone back and forth all week long looking at EPA numbers that Drake Toll likes to talk about a lot. I have kind of pondered what I feel about this BYU team. I've kind of gotten a sense. I like to go to practice, even though I get to watch practice, but coming off the practice, I get to kind of get a feel for how BYU's players, like the aura, I guess is the best way to say it, that they have about them. They are exuding a ton of confidence going into this game, it feels like. And so that's where it comes down to, as many of you know, I'm usually a heart versus head guy when it comes to predicting games like this. My head right now says Texas Tech, and it says Texas Tech maybe covers that margin, whether it's 9, 9.5, 10, 10.5 points. Speaking of the odds stacked against BYU, my gut says BYU has proven that they can win games, and they can win games no matter how they come. They're 8-0. You can't argue with hard and fast stats. So where am I going? Am I going with my heart? Am I going with my head? Well, I'm going with my heart. I'm going with my gut a little bit here. And I'm going to say that BYU finds a way to grind this one out. And yes, it comes at the expense of potentially the Big 12 missing out on a team that could find itself on the outside looking in when it comes to the college football playoff. But give me BYU 27, Texas Tech 24. I don't know why. I don't know how, but that's kind of been the story of this BYU season to date, is we don't know how it's going to happen, but they've done it time and time and time again. And I will say this, Bear Bachmeier, he's going to get the job done. He's going to lead BYU to a win, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all goes down. All right, coming up next, it is your time to shine. We'll get to as many questions as we have in the time remaining, and trust me, got a lot of them in the mailbag, a lot of good questions. I probably answered a fair amount of them with my breakdown of what I expect from this game. But coming up next, it's the mailbag, Locked On Cougars Insider Group mailbag on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. Now, when the opening whistle blows on a new repair, you get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. And any of you who work in the trades know exactly how difficult it can be to get stuff really in real time and overnight. But that's where our friends at Supply House come in. Their real-time inventory and honest lead time keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. They have part finder tools and 3D schematics that can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters along the way. And with their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support, they make the whole process smoother for you doing your job. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. All you gotta do is visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHCollege5 for your 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Once again, use the promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off. It's all courtesy of your friends over at Supply House. Real people and real service. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing fantastic out there in Cougar Nation. If you've not joined the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, I would encourage you guys to do so. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU and be a part of it and get some fun interaction as well. You guys can fire back with your thoughts via text message. It's a great way to support the show, but also build a relationship. So trust me, I feel like I know a bunch of you that I've only ever texted with via the Insider Group. But if you want to be a part of it, it's $5 a month to be a part of the group. You get a 14-day free trial, and the link is in the show notes below, or reach out to us via social media, and we'll get you squared away with the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, on to your questions. And I think I answered a fair amount of them in my breakdown, and I will say that if I do run across some. But number one coming in here, and this is going to impact, I think, some of you tomorrow, from David. Jake, how are you going to be watching the game? Because you have mentioned multiple times on social media, your YouTube TV subscriber, and so far, ESPN and YouTube TV are still, Disney, are still in a spat. Well, it's a good question, David. And the way I'm going to be watching this game tomorrow, and in fact, how I'm going to be able to do my film review, because without access to ESPN, it's hard to do what I like to do on this job. It's going to be another Insider Group member. They have lent me their login to their TV service, and that's how I'm going to watch this game unless it gets resolved in time for kickoff of this game. But we are now well over a week past the impasse coming out when it comes to YouTube TV and Disney. I think that Disney's just trying to pull a power play and force all of us over to their home app, the ESPN Unlimited, whatever you want to call it. Call me old fashioned, call me what you will. I'm digging my heels in. I do not want to have to buy another streaming service. Trust me, I pay for a lot of them. I have been a cord cutter for literally going on a decade at this point in my life. And I'm over it. And I'm actually seriously considering going back to cable. Let's just put it that way. I never thought I'd ever say that, but there you go. That's your answer, David. It's one of your fellow Insider Group members is hooking me up. Christian, have you considered doing football and basketball shows concurrently this fall and winter? Answer your question in a word. To answer your question in a word, Christian, yes. Now, the more detailed answer is, yes, I would like to do that, but I'm already, kind of stretched pretty thin with regards to being a husband, a father, and I essentially split my time between two pretty incredible jobs, doing sports radio at the KSL Sports Zone and then this fine podcast. I would love to do some BYU basketball specific shows, and I will do as many of them as I possibly can, but I cannot guarantee that I'll be able to do as many as you might be looking for. All right, good question here. McCord, an interesting stat for you to talk about if you like. BYU is averaging one interception every 20 passes that they face. Texas Tech is averaging nearly 35 passes per game, 34.7. But if the game is close, it's likely to increase that number of passes that Texas Tech throws. If BYU maintains that average of one interception to 20 passes they face, it's likely BYU could get 2 interceptions this week. McCord, if that holds true and BYU gets 2 interceptions, that could go a long way to helping BYU win this game. It's interesting. It'll be worth tracking in this game to see if they can bait Baron Morton into tossing some picks. He has thrown interceptions before, and he has found himself in trouble with regards to getting Tech behind the 8 ball. And BYU, if given that opportunity, needs to take advantage of that. Troy, with this game, I keep thinking about the Alamo Bowl last year. All the attention and hype were on the Buffs with their NFL talent and a Heisman Trophy winner. Same here with Tech. They're getting gloves up by everybody who's talking about their NFL talent. What similarities do you see between these two games? What do you think BYU learned about themselves in the Alamo Bowl that can help translate into success in Lubbock? Well, the one thing they learned in the Alamo Bowl is they can go out and punch a team in the face and not let them get off the deck. They literally did not let Colorado get off the deck in that game. They need to do a similar thing in this. A fast start, taking the crowd out of this game would be absolutely incredible if BYU could manage to do just that. So I think they learned that big games do not phase this BYU football program. And this is a big game. In fact, might be the biggest in some regards in program history. We've talked about that earlier this week for those of you who are everydayers. I think it's top 3. I think the 84 Holiday Bowl when BYU won the national title. I think 96, the Cotton Bowl. Some of you say the 1980 Holiday Bowl with the Miracle Bowl nature to it. That's one thing, but I'm telling you, the stakes on this game could not be higher. Let's see here. Preston, I'm stoked for this game on the weekend. How do you feel about BYU's ability to block this game? I'm really worried about Texas Tech in the trenches, as you should be. I already kind of talked about it. BYU's offensive line, I think, has to play its best game today. And in fact, BYU's defensive line, similar type of circumstance. They got to essentially do what they did against Utah. They got to plug plug up that front line and make it impossible for Texas Tech to run the football. Jeff, how many carries do you see LJ getting? My guess, 10 to 12. I would think you're probably right. 10 to 15 would be my mindset, I think, going into this game, because you don't want to expose him to a lot of injury. But I already kind of mentioned it earlier, is that if he's feeling good about himself, maybe just let him go. I'm telling you, he could incredibly all of a sudden feel like himself, or he could absolutely find himself back on the sideline very, very quickly. There's no in between, it feels like. Ken, with this game having so much consequence for the winner, what is your biggest concern for this? Mine is how healthy LJ is, and if he's only in there as a decoy, will that work, or can one of the other running backs finally step up? Well, if he is a decoy, you got to have another running back step up, but I love me some Preston Rex. I love me some Enoch Nawahine, Jovessa Damuni, etc. I just don't see any of them being capable of stepping up. Now, maybe it's Jovessa Damuni because we haven't seen a ton of him, but I hope that LJ's more than a decoy. I honestly do hope that. And I don't think he'd be out there just to be a decoy. I really don't think that would be the case. Bud, with an earlier than usual game and a bye last week, did the team do anything to simulate getting up and ready for an early game? They gave the players essentially like a plan to be like, hey, we need to have you up at this time every single day to get ready for the early wake up, because there's a 10 a.m. Mountain Time kick. It's a body clock. It'd be 11 a.m. Central Time. They'll probably be up 6:30, and they've probably told the players, you need to be up by that same time over the past week or so at minimum to get ready for that, because let's be honest, they're college athletes, and if you remember who were college age, getting up before 8 was a bit of a struggle for a lot of us out there. All right, let's see other questions here. Man, I got to get through a bunch of these. Brian, Jay's Buzz, BYU's been quietly working on some defensive adjustments specifically for Texas Tech's offense, maybe some new blitz packages or cover schemes. Any insights how the defensive staff is planning to counter Texas Tech's passing attack? Well, they're worried about the passing attack, but they're also worried about the rushing game, because they're absolutely very, very staunch in their rushing ability. So BYU has to slow down the run first and foremost. If you allow Texas Tech to run on you, it's going to be a very short game, and it might be a blowout. I'm telling you, it will be the wrong way to go down, is to think you can contain the passing game and expect to win, because rushing attack has to be your priority number one. I would expect that they have some wrinkles, no doubt. Jay Hill has proven to be a very adaptable coach in terms of throwing things out on the field that you've not seen before, speaking of the opposing team. He's had 2 weeks to prepare for this. He has broken down probably an eon's worth of film, and he will have a game plan that hopefully pays off. So I think there's probably some credence in them working on stuff. I don't have like insider intel on that, because that's like trade secrets that does not get passed around, but I think they'll be okay. There was a question there about BYU's offensive line. We already kind of talked about that. Let's see. Paul, how do you think Utah fan base will react to the following scenario happen? BYU wins out, winning the Big 12 championship at 13-0, earning them a bye into the college football playoff, and then playing in and winning the Rose Bowl game. And then, as he mentions, every BYU fan putting roses in all their social media handles. Let's see. Utah fans will respond with, see, you guys did the exact same thing that we did. Okay, you know what? Tit for tat, whatever. It would be like the hypocrisy is real. It would be absolutely classic if that plays out. All right, other questions here. Caden, assuming everybody ahead of us ranked wins, if BYU wins, how far up the rankings do they rise? And if they lose, how far do they drop? He says, I'm scared of a Kansas repeat where we went from 6 all the way to 14. Now, you're playing a fellow top 10 team. Remember, Kansas last year was pretty good, but they were sub 500. That's why BYU got sunk like a stone by the College Football Playoff Committee in that circumstance. This game, when it's a fellow top 10 team who's one place behind you, if you win, you probably move up maybe to top 5. If you lose, if you drop out of the top 10, I'll be stunned. I don't think you move a ton either way. Honestly, I really do not think that. Russ, would you prefer to have a home playoff game or a bye? I would prefer a home playoff game. I just want a playoff game to see LaVell Edwards Stadium in mid-December, like playing a game, bring I don't know, Notre Dame, who's been kind of eschewing any opportunity to go play in Provo. They've been avoiding it actively for 20 years since the last time they played in Provo. I'd love to see Notre Dame. And a couple of you also already talked about, is it true that Notre Dame would be BYU's opponent? Yeah. Based on the current bracket, they'd be the 10 seed facing off against 7 seed BYU, and that would be played at LaVell Edwards Stadium. That is legitimately, if the playoff were to happen today, that's the matchup for BYU. Marvin, I'm hoping BYU just takes care of business and wins out, but it seems unlikely. If BYU has to lose one of its last 4 games, would you rather be to Texas Tech or Cincinnati? I think a loss to Tech would not hurt them as bad as a loss to Cincinnati, given the Utah loss last week for Cincinnati. Yeah, I'm with you. I think losing to Tech is your most advantageous loss. It really is, because it sets you up. You can lose one here. You have a mulligan essentially to utilize, and it would set up what should be a very, very compelling Big 12 title game with a rematch between Texas Tech and BYU, assuming they take care of business in the games following this matchup tomorrow. Let's see, Travis, what does it mean that BYU is number 7 in the college football playoff? It's just they're ranked number 7. Simply, that's where they're ranked right now in the national title race. And then also, can a team go to the college football playoff if they lose the conference championship game? Yeah, absolutely. They have at-large bids. The top 5 conference champions are assured of a spot in the field. Those are the only guarantees in the college football playoff world today. Last year, the top 4 college football playoff, the top 4 college champions, conference champions, got the top. I think I lost my mic there, but hopefully I did not lose anything else there. So that was kind of weird. That was a unique situation. All of a sudden I lost my mic. So yeah, maybe it's telling me it's time to sign off. So yeah, apologies for the mic gaffe there. But to reiterate the question and the answer there is that essentially you have to win the games that are in front of you to get into the college football playoff, but you can be an at-large team and absolutely get yourself right back into the mix. There absolutely is very capable there. Okay, we are like running out of time very, very quickly. So let's see. I'm going to get a few more questions in here. Oh man, let's see. Good question here from Bryce. When there's obvious things like run game and turnovers, what's an understated, under the radar thing would be a major factor for BYU to win that game against Texas Tech? I think I already talked about that. It's the field position game. If BYU can win the field position game, I think it absolutely helps BYU win that game. Tanner, if BYU plays Texas Tech 10 times, how many times do they win? 4, maybe 5. That's in my mind. It's like a 50-50 split. Philip Hatch, not related to me. I don't think, Philip, but what's the most realistic best case scenario in the conference? Is there a real possibility that BYU, Tech, and or Cincinnati/Utah all could get in? Well, Cincinnati's not ranked, so they're probably on that side looking in. But if all 3 of the others, Tech, BYU, and Utah, win out, yeah, you could see a 3-horse race in terms of getting into the playoff from the Big 12, especially if the ACC keeps kind of floundering with its top-tier programs. Virginia's the top-ranked team in the ACC right now at 14. They're behind all 3 Big 12 teams. So just keep winning. Stay ahead of the pack and see how it all shakes out. That's the thing I think that would help BYU in that. And we'll finish up with some fun ones here because, like I said, I'm not going to get all these questions here. So apologies if I didn't get to your question today, but I'm going to give 3 fun ones off the bat here to round out this show. First one from Jordan. Ryder Lyons is in an Under Armour commercial. AJ and him both now have been in commercials. Now, would anybody have believed this a couple of years ago? Well, to be honest, no. And if you were a time traveler who had transformed and taken me back and said, hey, all of a sudden you're going to have the nation's top-rated basketball recruit playing at BYU, like, how did they pull that off with Dave Rose or Mark Pope or whoever it was? I'd want to know that. And then Ryder Lyons, a top-rated 5-star quarterback, like, okay, well, what's going on? Yeah, so it's cool to see them getting that pub. Now, Ryan asked this. If you had to do the fantasy football punishment of sitting in a breakfast diner, like Waffle House, for 24 hours, and every pancake you eat takes an hour off your timer, how long would you be in there with how many pancakes eaten? Okay, pancakes are not my favorite. I prefer waffles, to be very blunt. But if it were to come to it, man, if it's like a Waffle House pancake, man, I could probably get 10 of them down and carve off about 10 hours, but I'd still be there for 14 hours. Probably is where I would peg it at. We'll see what, maybe one day I'll get to experience that. And then the final thing here from Tyson, are you a Christmas decorations music guy before or after Thanksgiving? Well, let's put it this way. I think I've told you the story before on this podcast, so you are longtime listeners. I grew up with a grandmother and a mom who were voice coaches, and they coached, I don't know, they were directors of music groups. When you're getting ready for, the holiday season, that music starts coming around the Hatch household, at least it did, in like July. Yeah, so imagine coming home from playing sports in the middle of July and all of a sudden you hear, have a holly jolly Christmas. Just like, what is going on? It's 100 and whatever degrees outside, and my mom's playing Christmas music. Well, that's what I grew up with. And the older I have gotten, I absolutely love Christmas. November 1st, the day after Halloween, Christmas music is good on my part. Decorating, whenever my wife wants to put up the decorations, that's when they go up, and usually kind of go up mid-November. So I am a before Thanksgiving guy. And in fact, November 1st, I think, is the start date in my world of when Christmas music is allowed. But that's just me because, like I said, I grew up with Christmas music playing in July. All right. That's going to do it. This is going to be a fun game. I am so excited to see how it all goes down. But like I said, I'm going with my heart. I'm going with my gut. And I am, as they say, ready to be hurt again, even though BYU hasn't been hurt really this season at 8-0. But we'll have a full reaction for you guys after this game goes final tomorrow. We'll also have BYU basketball tomorrow night, their home opener against Holy Cross. I'm going to do a special edition at some point today, speaking of Friday, to get you ready for that game as well. So stay tuned for that. But as always, thank you, truthfully, for all of your support. Thank you for being everydayers here on the podcast. And come back tomorrow as we react to whatever happens between BYU and Texas Tech right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.